Now, the Nelson Mandela Foundation has welcomed former President Jacob Zuma's decision to submit himself to law enforcement in partial compliance with the order of the Constitutional Court. The court sentenced him to 15 months in prison last week. However, the foundation has noted that Zuma failed to abide by the deadline set by the Constitutional Court, thus continuing a pattern of disregard for the rule of law and for constitutional democracy. To discuss this now, we're joined by the Communications and Advocacy Manager at the Nelson Mandela Foundation, Kneo Mokgopa. Thank you so much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thanks for having us. It's good to be on.
All right, so you've been watching this case for some time, much like the rest of South Africa. Up until he handed himself over, what has been the position the foundation has been taking in terms of watching the matter unfold?
I think up until the point at which Mr. Zuma handed himself over, our position was for the rule of law to take its course and for the judicial system to have its opportunity to effect justice without kind of weighing in on the merits of whatever cases that were pending at that time. I think ours was to give faith and trust in the judicial system.
All right, and you were concerned about the delays in terms of a missed deadline on Sunday, and then the debates that took place. Not sure whether it was legal advice or defiance, but he took his time, didn't he?
He did, and this is nothing new that we've seen from Mr. Zuma. I think what we've witnessed is a character of history at this point that enjoys attention, that enjoys kind of reveling in that, look at me, look at how I'm able to act with impunity without consequences, and I can continuously do this. I can do this in many different areas, and I'm sure you can name them, the list of cases, the list of situations, the list of trauma that this country has faced under the presidency of Mr. Zuma. And this was really more of the same, this kind of peddling a victim narrative as a weapon against our senses of justice, really much of the same. And I think that also noted in our statement was this tweet from Sisonke Msemang, and it goes, "The thing about toxic masculinity is that it weaponizes impunity. So lying in the face of the nation is the point. Mr. Zuma and his spinners don't expect anyone to believe them. They want us to know they don't care," close quote.
We know that the former president was quite close to President Mandela during his lifetime. How much do you know in terms of how much counsel the late President Mandela gave to President Zuma during his time?
It's quite unclear at this time. I think our records and the archives that we have access to during his time at Robben Island, his time in the struggle in Umkhonto we Sizwe, it's unclear exactly what kind of relationship they may have shared, or at least it's not necessarily public knowledge at this time. But it would seem as though here are two figures who come from very similar historical perspectives and have enjoyed very similar environments historically. And we would hope from that perspective that they would share perspectives and share ideologies and beliefs, but it doesn't seem to be the case.
And what would have been his advice, do you think? I mean, we're asking you to speculate, but, as people who work with the foundation and are in charge of memory, what kind of advice do you think Nelson Mandela would have given Jacob Zuma this past week in particular, especially given that Nelson Mandela was a lawyer?
I don't know. And I'm sorry to say that, but I sincerely do not know. But I think what has been so profoundly disturbing is that when we look at the legacy of Nelson Mandela, there was that moment where the country was on the brink of civil war. And Nelson Mandela, in his tactful, arbitration and his, astute political ability, was able to steer the nation away from what would have been an incredible calamity, an incredible civil war, and was able to steer us away. But what we're seeing with Mr. Zuma is somewhat of the opposite, in the sense that he seems to be very comfortable to invoke the intonations of scenes such as Marikana, to, gather the symbols of violence around him, and really to taunt the nation with violence in ways that we don't believe Nelson Mandela could have aligned himself with.
What do you think the events have done for South Africa in terms of, we're hearing that the rule of law has been re-established, the judiciary has retaken its power, those kinds of sentiments. But what do you think it may mean for the public in general?
I think that's such an interesting point. And in many ways, Mr. Zuma has, over the years, concentrated in him the symbols of, I'm not even entirely sure how to really frame it, but in this particular moment, there is a way in which the general public seems to be understanding him as symbolic of many things. We'll remember the Thales case, or the arms deal. We'll remember Kwezi. We'll remember the Guptas. And all of these moments are, and other areas that Mr. Zuma has come to represent for this country. And I think that for many South Africans and many people around this world as well, and on the continent, are feeling this moment as though it is about them as well, as though there's the opportunity for even just symbolic justice, that if a figure like Jacob Zuma can be brought to justice, then perhaps there is hope for justice for me. There is justice for my case, for my sexual assault, for my, asbestos roofing and otherwise, my stolen grant. And there is this sensation that perhaps it's possible, perhaps this country is possible, perhaps the promise of this constitution is available to us. And in that way, the stakes are incredibly high and passionately debated across many platforms. And of course, the opposite is true as well of figures, individuals and other bodies that want to align themselves with the kind of influence that Mr. Zuma has been able to amass over the years, and who see themselves as the next figure to amass similar kinds of influence. And for them as well, the stakes are high as well, So this moment is hugely symbolic, as the previous segment that you were discussing. It's unprecedented, right? We've barely been able to imagine a moment like this, and here it is unfolding before our eyes.
Nelson Mandela was the first person to say, I'm not perfect, and I don't want you as the media, and this is talking to journalists, to report me as if I'm a saint. I'm not, I've got my failings as well. Is it important for us, when we tell the Jacob Zuma story, to tell a full story rather than what's happened towards the end of his political career, if this is what it is?
Of course. I don't think we're able to understand this moment in its full veracity without telling the full story, without telling of his struggled credentials and, the full scope of his humanity. But at the same time, it doesn't exclude the gravity of his shortcomings and the consequences for the psyche of this nation that he's had over the time that he's been able to hold our attention.
All right. Final word, I think, in terms of how the foundation sees law, citizens, and abiding by constitutional court orders going forward?
I think by way of final words, there is a very strong temptation to regard Mr. Zuma's arrest as the end of a chapter. But this is merely another phase in what we believe will be a long and fraught journey. The patterns and the dangers are clear, and it is vital that Mr. Zuma and his supporters be held accountable at every step of the way.
All right. Thank you so much indeed for joining us and sharing your time with us and your thoughts. Thank you for your time, Kneo Mokgopa.
Thank you.
Thank you.